Hello and welcome to MotorInc First. Kartikeya has just returned from the glorious city of Bengaluru, having driven the glorious all-new, it's all new, right? All-new Maruti Suzuki Swift. He and I have very carefully avoided talking about the car so far, primarily because that's the format for MotorInc First. Second, because I have no interest in cars fundamentally, but I did see a picture of the car on a colleague's screen, and my first reaction was it looked like a fish out of water gasping for air.
So Shumi, thank you for at least looking at the new Swift, because you remember when we spoke about the seal, I asked him, have you seen it? No.
On National Geographic, I had seen seals, but not the BYD one.
Thanks, man. So coming straight to one of the points that he raised, all new, yes or no? Yes, they call it all new. It's the...
No, 1 second. They call it all new or you call it all new?
They are calling it all new.
What are you calling it?
I'm calling it in between.
So it's not all new?
It's not all new in the sense that it's not going to make you think that, wow, this is a completely fresh take on the Swift.
Okay.
Right? In many ways, it's going to feel very familiar. We've seen it with the Baleno, we've seen it with the Brezza, and now we see it with the Swift.
Okay.
I think it's something that we've spoken about in the past. The companies are stretching their platforms, how long they can take them, without having to reinvent the wheel, because they're hedging between all the future tech that they need to create.
Okay.
So the time, effort, money is kind of being conserved. It's not that they're skimping, but it's being conserved for sure.
Okay.
Right? So if you look at the Swift now, in terms of dimensions, it's pretty much the same as the old Swift.
Yeah.
It's only different in terms of length because of slight cosmetic. I mean, the new look, it has a new look. Every panel on it is different. So there's nothing carried over.
Okay.
But it will look familiar. It will look similar.
But that's okay, right? Because a car has to have its own identity, and therefore they can't go too far away from it where people are wondering, is this the new Swift?
Correct. Correct.
So fair enough, right? It should look like an extension of whatever was going on before. So okay, I don't have a problem with that.
And the Swift as a design, if you think about it from the start, was always a slightly uncomfortable design. If you think about the first gen Swift also, we had seen nothing else like it.
Correct.
The street back headlamps, that strangely bulky rear.
Correct.
Right? It was awkward, honestly. We look back at it now with fondness, but it was not a pretty car.
No, and in fact, the arrival of the Desire actually made the Swift look good, so which was a good thing.
Correct. That is true. So, people are talking about the design of the Swift, and I think discomfort has always been a part of the Swift's DNA.
Right.
And if we think about this is now the 4th generation Swift. It's incredible to think about it. Correct. It's been around for that long now. And this takes the cues of the previous generation one and kind of moves it forward, smoothens it out, makes it look a little bit more upmarket. I think it has a bit more mini to it in terms of how the upper half floats.
Okay.
There are two distinct halves like that. There's a clamshell hood, and clamshell basically is, think of it as a, what is it? What does a pearl come out of?
Yeah.
Clam? No.
Yeah.
Pearl comes out
clam.
of a?
Yeah.
It's a clam only. Okay. Out of a clam, right? Seriously?
Yeah.
Okay. Mother of pearl. It comes out of a clam. Huh?
Yeah.
Okay, fine. So whatever it comes out of, that how it shuts like that, the lid, that's the design for the hood. That's where the clamshell term comes from, right?
Okay.
So they've got that. All these little details look nice. I like that. It gives a smoothness to it. So it's a completely new design. There's nothing carried over, but it will look familiar. What I saw with the car, some things that really popped out, the tail lamps, they look very familiar.
Oh.
And when I Googled it, I'll try to put that picture as well. It reminded me of a set of aftermarket tail lamps that I'd seen on the previous gen Swift. And it turns out they're not very different. So I don't know how that happened, but there is a previous gen Swift aftermarket fitment that
looks like the new one.
Very similar. It's just the inlays in that are a bit different. Otherwise, the essential layout is the same.
Interesting.
So that kind of popped out at me. And the other thing was that something that we complained about when we spoke about the Swift earlier, and that was paint, right? We thought that it wouldn't last as well. So first impressions here are better. We did inquire whether there is a new painting process or they're doing more layers or whatever. We've been told it's the same.
Okay.
But this looked glossier. This looked a little bit more durable. I did go around trying to just rubbing up the panels to see if there's any fade.
With his hand, not with a key.
Yeah. No, not that. But I did. The next video will tell you what else I did. We'll put that up. So it seems to be better made.
Okay.
Is there any difference in the sheet metal thickness? They say no again.
Okay.
But then the shapes can make a difference.
Yeah, of course.
So the shapes would be different. So you can see in the video that we'll put up here, where I'm just hammering it with my fist, and at points I'm just pushing it against the front fender with my entire body weight, and there's barely any give.
Okay.
There is some give in some places, but not like what we had seen before.
But apart from the perceived value of this quality, is there any other value of this quality?
No, but this is a part of the satisfaction that people are getting out of it, or dissatisfaction.
So it is a psychological requirement, but it doesn't
Absolutely.
have any actual structural improvement. This does not represent anything significant like that.
I mean, for all intents and purposes, they could make the exterior skin out of plastic and...
it would perform the same in a crash.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Good to know.
So there are those kind of improvements that you'll see. Largely in terms of dimensions, it's the same as before. There's no change actually to the chassis itself.
Is this still a sub 4 meter car?
It's still a sub 4 meter car.
But the trend today is that the sub 4 meter cars aren't doing as well as they used to. So Maruti could easily have built this into a slightly larger car if they felt like, in terms of the response to sales, right?
Right.
Okay.
So they already have the Baleno, which is closer to 4 meters.
Right.
The Swift is significantly smaller than the Baleno.
Okay.
Right. So it's always been the smaller family car, so to speak, and the more youthful car to have in the family,
Sure.
right? The more fun to drive car, so to speak. So in terms of size, it's the same.
Yeah.
Cabin volume is the same.
Hmm.
There's a slight difference in boot space, nothing major. It's just a couple of liters.
Increased or decreased?
Decreased.
Okay.
It's gone down a bit. Wheel size, same. New alloy wheel design, but again, nothing.
So we've spoken about this in the context of the Activa, the Splendor, mass market vehicles that do really well. I think their success hamstrings the manufacturers because that proposition is what the customers are coming for. And if you fundamentally alter that proposition, then a secure customer who would ordinarily just come and buy that product will disappear. So honestly, not that I know anything about the Swift, but I'm not expecting Maruti as an organization. They're not super adventurous anyway. So anyway, the top 10 cars in this country, I think 6 or 7 of them will be Marutis. In there, the Swift will be among the higher positions. You don't mess with a product like that.
So that's what I think the Swift, with its slightly more youthful position, right? With the arrival of the Baleno, right? The Baleno, if they didn't mess around with, I get it, right? It's meant to be a more family, a more do-it-all kind of car in that sense. Whereas the Swift, I would liken to the Dio. Right?
Yeah, but again, if you look at the pattern that Maruti follows, the Swift has a certain amount of sportiness that you perceive in the character of it. Has that ever actually been part of the car's DNA? It's a very restrained thing. The Swift Sport would have been a sportier Swift. Maruti is going nowhere close to the sporty Swift. And I don't think they're going to do it this time either.
Actually, that's where my hopes for the Swift went up a lot with the previous gen. Because I think they did something special there.
Okay.
Right? It's a very interesting thing to note that between, let's say, the Ignis, the Swift, and the Baleno, they have managed to create 3 different personalities. Right? In the way the cars behave.
Yeah.
And we have seen this with the chassis, so how they drive, how the suspension works, and even with things like the tuning for the AMT, right? The automated manual transmission, how they would tune it. The tune even for the Swift and the Desire was different.
Yeah.
It wasn't the same. They created a different feel.
Yeah.
So what they had done was, I thought, pretty special, right? They created cars that felt different to drive and therefore would be appreciated by different audiences as well.
Sure.
Right? So with the previous gen Swift, I definitely enjoyed driving it a lot more than I had expected and more than I did in the second gen Swift.
Yeah, but I'm saying, look at the sense of courage at Maruti Suzuki right now, right? If you're going to say that the Swift is a sporty car and you can do a little bit of AMT tuning and blah, 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 but you'll never bring the Swift Sport. What is a Swift Sport? I mean, look at the i20 N-Line as an example. What did they really do in that car? They did a little bit of trim work. They set up the suspension to a slightly stiffer setting, which is just stiff enough to make you feel sporty without becoming super impractical.
Correct.
That's the template for a Swift Sport.
That's what they should do.
Right?
Yeah.
But I see Maruti doing this, let's put a number to it, never. It's just not that kind of organization today. It just doesn't want to do these things.
Right.
If they had done these things ages ago and created the idea that Maruti can straddle premium products, specialist and enthusiast oriented products and mass market products, today I think you'd be willing to buy a 60-65 lakh rupee Maruti car. But you won't do it because this is a hardcore mass oriented manufacturer. They will do this sporty thing as a tinge or a flavor or a hue over a large spread. But they will never focus it enough to bring you a Swift Sport. So if you're thinking there'll be a Swift Sport, I guarantee there won't be one.
And there's never been a bigger need for a Swift Sport now than with this new generation, because what the Swift has become now is grown up and a little bit boring, right? It's okay. Let me put that in a more fleshed out manner. It's become better on every front, but at the same time,
it's focused on becoming more practical, fitting into your family more neatly, feeling more useful to more people in the family, and therefore having a wider appeal in the market, which is what I said in the first place. Maruti focuses on the mass, and the smaller specialist niches is not what Maruti does, which is why they can't crack the premium market at all. They'll never be able to do it unless they snap out of it. And honestly, there is no economic incentive for them to snap out of it yet. When that incentive comes, India's largest manufacturer of cars will be left high and dry because they are not part of our aspiration set. They are part of our mass set. And this is a country that is moving very, very quickly towards aspiration. And remember, buying a car itself is an aspiration.
Yeah. So for people who are looking at the Swift as their first car in the household and all of that, and see, we forget about it. And some of you have also mentioned that, we are the cream who are getting to drive and ride everything we want. And yes, we accept that. And for a lot of people, just buying a Swift will be a dream come true.
Yes, absolutely.
Or any car. And we get that. But the point is, even then, when it was possible for it to be a little bit more characterful, when you have so many cars.
Even as an option, it doesn't have to be the core car.
Yeah. And you're talking about, this is a car that's at its upper end is almost 10 lakh rupees.
Correct.
So it's not that far away from a Baleno, right? So if this was a choice, today, if I think about it, the Swift to me really feels like a smaller Baleno in that sense.
Yeah.
It's no longer Swift in the way that I thought of it.
Okay.
That even as a 40-something-year-old, that I thought that I want to get a Swift. And on that note, if those the driving enthusiasts, if you were holding out for this Swift for whatever reason, go out and buy the old Swift if you can. If you can get it, get it.
It's more fun to drive than this car.
That's the right point. It's more fun to drive. Is it quicker?
Yeah, so again, spec sheet performance, the new Swift will be better.
Yes.
But what you're saying is the old Swift will be more emotional.
More joyous.
More joyous.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Okay. We'll go through the interior quickly.
Yeah. We've done lots of philosophy. Let's go back to the car.
Because I want to talk about the engine, of course, because that's a key part of what we are talking.
Sure.
But quickly about the interior.
Yeah.
It's, again, in terms of volume, space,
you
comfort,
said it's roughly the same.
It's roughly the same. There's a new dashboard. It looks better.
Okay.
It's what I have come to expect from Maruti Suzuki.
So not cool.
Is that it looks better than the one on the Baleno, actually. If you ask me, this design looks better. And they feel well built. But do they look cool? No, they don't.
Yeah.
The cabin is just dark. There's just one hint of silver. And I was speaking to the engineering teams there and saying that there's a small comparison to be made. Like, look at Renault for their budget vehicles, right? They're not throwing color everywhere. It's not an expensive or an, it's not bold in that sense, right? But they're doing subtle things which make a difference, right?
It has a little bit of flair.
Yeah, just a little bit of highlights. Like on the seat upholstery, there'll be a streak of yellow, or on the dashboard, a little bit of white, which all uplifts the sense of the cabin, right? And these are the small touches that I expect that brands should cleverly integrate now, so that you get the sensation of being in something more special without being dramatic or polarizing. And I get it. You don't want it to be, too much for people to handle, right? So they've got this new dash, and the center console is angled slightly towards the driver. There's a new instrument cluster, which looks really nice. So it's simple. It's not flashy, but the needles on it, I swear, I noticed the needles on it. They look so good. So small things like that. And you look at those and you think, nice, right? That's the stuff that gives you joy, right? It's just done. It's not loud, but you notice the needles, right? So those kind of things. Seats, I did between the two cars. We drove the AMT and the manual, and we did about 200 kilometers. And so that's a lot of time in the car. And I didn't get out of the car feeling tired. Right. It's just that I was a bit sweaty because there's still no ventilated seats or anything like that. They're fabric seats.
In this segment, are there other cars which ventilate seats?
No, but just because it's new, there'll be expectations of sunroof, ventilated seats, and whatever.
So the same guys who keep asking for more safety also want a hole in the roof?
Very often.
Okay. No, I'm just checking. I am not judging you.
So we'll talk. Okay, there's a lot to talk about with this, right? So the cabin is similar. Seats did feel better. So one of the things that a lot of people would know if they've driven a Swift before is that while the seats looked very broad and with side bolstering which was prominent, it was a bit too soft, which wasn't the case here. It held you nicely.
Okay.
So that's an improvement that seems to be in place. Back seat similar as before. So if you want a car for the back seat, this is not the one. You will go for the Baleno. I know a lot of you are going to be thinking between the Swift and the Baleno. Get the Baleno if you are looking for a family all-rounder, because the back seat is significantly better there.
Okay.
Right? It's not a small difference, it's a big difference.
So if you have a nuclear family, get a Baleno. If you have an unclear family, get a Swift.
Back to that.
No, Singhee is not part of this. Singhee is not part of this.
What is this?
Every time I make a joke like this, you're like, I'm not part of this.
Okay.
And I will have you know that when I said Total Ross on the Japan podcast, it was a hit.
I'm not saying anything, man. You do what you have to.
I see you.
You and you. Enjoy. Keep me out of it.
Sorry, rear seat. So you're saying the Baleno is a better family car and the Swift is a better car for a much smaller family where the front seats take priority over what goes on in the back.
Yes.
All right.
It's not a car that will be uncomfortable for taller occupants, even in the front seats. There's plenty of space, plenty of headroom. It's really impressive on that front. So front seats for taller occupants will also be fine. Rear seats, decent, but not great. For that, the Baleno will be better.
Okay.
Which we will now quickly jump to. Features,
sure.
Just small updates. Overall, the car in terms of pricing has not changed much. Right?
Okay.
At the bottom and at the top, it's up by about $30,000.
Okay.
Right? And that's pretty decent considering that now it has 6 airbags as standard. It is a car with an updated chassis as well. Right? So while the basic size is the same, the materials it uses are different. It has more stronger steel and all of that.
Why are you telling all of this? They'll still say Tinka Dabba in the comments.
हाँ, लेकिन मेरा काम है क्योंकि मैं ये गाड़ी के साथ I'll be satisfied with it in that sense, right? So that's your problem if it doesn't work for you. But the chassis is now stiffer, it's stronger. It's getting more safety equipment as standard, like 6 airbags. And all of this right from the base variant is just for about $30,000 more. And of course, it also gets ESC, hill hold, and all of that as standard as well.
Okay.
Right? So for that $30,000 more, $25,000 more, you're
safety
getting
quotient is significantly higher than previous for sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
And at the top end, what you're getting additional now, aside from all this, is wireless charger, and something else a little bit frivolous like that, connected car tech. So for me, the top spec variant, will quickly do a variant thing here. ZXi Plus, not interested. I'd go for the ZXi. The only thing I'd really miss out on is the reversing camera. And interestingly enough, that's only available in the top spec variant.
But it's a small car. You should be able to work without a reversing camera completely easily.
And even if you don't get it as an accessory, it's fine. Yeah, I don't need to stretch for that.
Okay.
It gets a larger, it also gets a larger touchscreen. It's a 9-inch touchscreen. It's gone from 7 whatever to 9-inch on the top spec, and the lower one gets 8 inches or something like that. Right. So a smaller screen, larger screen. No real deal breakers for me here. I'd be happy with the ZXi easily. Right. So that's out of the way. Now, we said go buy the existing Swift if you are a driving enthusiast.
Yeah.
Because engine. Now.
So let's talk engines.
Yeah. So now there's just one engine. It's always, we've just had one engine.
Per car, there was always one engine only. No?
Sorry?
Per car, there was.
Yeah, per car, there was your choices have been limited to one engine on the Swift for some time, right?
Oh, okay.
So earlier it was the 1.2 liter 4-cylinder, the K series, right? Which, according to me, is one of the best engines I have driven at any given point in time.
Okay.
It definitely deserves to be on a pedestal.
And that was mated to a Maruti gearbox, which is among usually the better gearboxes. So that would have been a spectacular combination.
So yeah, the gearbox also was superb. And I think it's a shame that this engine has not been given Engine of the Year award ever.
Let's not talk about awards. They have no relevance.
No, I mean, it just points out how it doesn't make any sense, because this engine is beautiful and it's never been called out for that. And now,
so the K stands for Kartikeya, right?
I'm going to call it that now. Kartikeya spec. I love that engine. So that engine is being phased out, right? We will still have it in some of the cars for some time, because you can be sure that this new 1.2 liter 3-cylinder engine will become the default for all the cars that are using the 4-cylinder version right now. This is called the Z now, the Z series or whatever, right?
So you're basically saying it is a 3Z, right? Z series.
Wow.
Wherever you're heading in that direction only.
PZQ.
No, not that bad.
You guys.
Not that bad, huh?
No. So that's what. The engine is actually functionally better.
Okay.
It's easier to drive. So, okay, another thing you have to remember is that the 1.2 liter was very zippy, the 4-cylinder, the K series engine. But with all the successive emission norms, it became softer and softer.
Yes.
It's still the best engine there of that kind.
Okay.
Right? But it's become softer and softer. Right? So my Ignis, which is pre-BS6, right, is very nice right from low RPMs. But the new engines became softer and softer.
Sure. Okay.
Right? Now this brings back that peppiness at low RPMs.
Okay.
Right? Becomes easier to drive. It's also quicker. Right? It's actually about 8 PS down in terms of power. Right?
Okay.
It's got a little bit lower torque. But in terms of 0 to 100 and all, it's quicker.
Has the gearing been changed to accommodate it?
No. So that's the other thing. So the gearboxes and the ratios are the same.
Wow.
That's not changed.
So it's just response.
It's just responsiveness.
Wow.
Right?
Okay.
And I also checked the max in gears and all. There's a slight difference, but that would be down to the other factor that this car revs slightly lower.
Okay.
The older car used to go to about 6,200 or something. This taps out at 6,000.
Okay.
Right? So it's still like in the sense that first gear is 45, second is 85, third is 130.
Yeah, these Maruti third gears are insane.
Yeah, and it just drives smoothly, right?
Yeah.
Throughout.
Yeah.
So the performance is very much there.
Right.
Right? It's quick, it's easy to drive, and the most impressive bit about this engine is how smooth it is.
Okay.
Right? I drove first the AMT. The AMT wouldn't let it shift down below 1500 RPM. It would just keep it above that, come what may. So you never got into the real low RPM zone where it would start, shuddering and jhatka dena like that. Couldn't get it to do that. So then I drove the manual. And the manual, I pulled it down to almost 500 RPM. I'm not kidding. I wasn't looking at the RPM meter. I was just driving. And at one point I said, I'm just going to let it go as low as I can and I'll accelerate. So I accelerated and it was like there was no response for a second. And I was like, why is it doing that? And then I looked down. I was like, man, I'm at 500 RPM.
Wow.
And from there, it pulled without any jhatka, without any noise, nothing. It just got going.
Nice.
So usability, great, right? There's no issue with that. The 3-cylinder aspect of it, somewhere you will feel, of course.
Sure.
Like you feel that slight pulse when you're at idle or at lower speeds. The bigger factor for me is you feel some of that boominess. That 3-cylinder has that heavy kind of feel.
Yeah.
You hear that at times.
Okay.
Right? So like when you're
at certain rev ranges, there is a...
It's there little bit when you're at higher speeds.
Okay.
It's there. Right? So typically when you're traveling on the highway and with the old 4-cylinder, it would just be quiet. The engine you don't hear practically. Right. It's just going unless you decide to
rev it out. Yeah.
Yeah. Until then, it's just there in the background doing its thing. So here, this has a little bit more presence.
Okay.
Does it bother you? Not really. I'm doing a comparison.
But I suppose if it's always there, you'll also get used to it over some...
Correct.
I mean, you shouldn't have to get used to it, but you will get used to it if you have to.
You don't have a choice about this. You have to get used to it because this is the only engine you have. And...
for now.
If you're wondering why this engine has happened, if you ask me, it's a forward-looking move. This engine is, according to me, going to be a part of the hybrid setup that's going to come in the future. Going down in terms of cylinders is saving space, saving weight, saving cost. So this engine will complement the future hybrid setup. It's going to be a part of that. So this is one way of just making things simpler.
Okay.
Right? So losing out on that character is a price that we are going to have to pay for getting hybrid systems in the future.
Okay.
Right? So that's my rationale. Why has it not happened in the Swift, if you're asking? Because this car is, like Shumi said, one very critical car. It's not a place that you will immediately do a test with a new system, especially when it's brand new.
Yeah, you will establish this and then do a disrupt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, like, to give an example that we've cited before, the easiest, since a lot of motorcyclists are here, is like when Royal Enfield came out with the new J series.
Correct.
They came out with
the Meteor first, not the Classic, because the Classic is the bread and butter bike. They would not touch it until they're absolutely sure everything is in place.
So the Swift, they will not mess around with. It would change value perceptions, because coming with a hybrid system, let's say it's going to bump up cost by another lakh or so.
Correct.
So you're going to take it into another territory altogether, and within their family itself, it would create confusions.
Yeah.
So you can expect the hybrid system to come, but on some other model, or to come at a future date in the Swift.
What do you think, according to you, is where this hybrid engine system will show up first? Which car would you pick? Ignis.
Ignis, no chance. It'll have to be one of the high-end ones. So, Baleno, Franks,
Ciaz.
Oh, with this engine, I don't know.
The Ciaz has not been updated in what, 32 years now?
Oh man, it's actually over 10
It certainly
years.
feels like it, right? Because you guys comment a lot saying, what about the Ciaz?
Correct.
And honestly, nobody's heard of the Ciaz for a while. There haven't been test cars for a while. There's almost no way to do a Ciaz story. And whatever the Ciaz sells, it sells. But that segment's cars have moved on.
Yeah.
Right? So if Maruti wants to play that game, they have to bring a new Ciaz. And to me, this 3-cylinder engine with a reasonably good hybrid system would immediately put them back in contention.
Yeah. It could even do it in the Brezza, actually.
Yeah.
And the Brezza has been selling really well, considering it has only one engine.
Correct, and it's stable now. So again, it's if they were to introduce a Brezza hybrid, say next year or something, and if that price were to jump up even to 2.5 lakh rupees in the process of the hybrid driving, plus you add a little bit of feature additions and all, I think there's a stable enough base on which you can build the premium out.
Yeah. The Brezza would be a
What do you
candidate.
think? What do you think will happen? Will it come to the Brezza first, or do you think the Ciaz update will carry the hybrid into?
New Ciaz, not update. New Ciaz.
When I mean update, I mean now it has to be a completely new car.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no point updating a car that was last updated. Nobody can remember when.
Yeah.
So yeah, fair enough.
So
that would definitely put the Swift Sport hybrid. No, there's no Sport. The Swift hybrid at what? 3 years from now? 2 years from now, at least.
Yeah.
Okay, good to know.
I don't think that they would even do a Swift hybrid.
You don't think so?
From the looks of it, from whatever I've understood.
So Baleno hybrid maybe, Swift hybrid perhaps not.
Perhaps not.
So there's no 40 kilometer per litre Swift coming.
So that's what their point is, that this car's already become more fuel efficient. The buyer looking to get one of these isn't going to be clocking those kind of kilometers.
Right.
It will probably be somebody in a segment above.
Okay.
So that's where it would make more sense.
Oh, so there is a correlation to people buying more expensive cars and driving more?
I think so, because when you're talking about more versatile cars, right?
Like that way. Okay,
right?
fair.
Like a Brezza, for instance, I can assume safely
that you do more things with that car. Right, fair enough. Right. And the Swift, therefore, will primarily be a city-oriented family car in that sense.
A more young person's car, so necessarily not running around that much as well.
So the older people are doing more than the younger people is the inference that I'm drawing from this. Dude, fix it.
Younger people are having fun.
Get out there, get off your phones, go do things.
So, engine-wise?
Fuel economy, you didn't give a number. How much is it gone up, gone down?
We'll put it up. I don't have the number, but it's up by 10-15%. So from, let's say, from 23 to 25 or something.
Fair enough, okay.
Right? In the time that I spent with the car, both the cars, and drove 80-something kilometers, 80-90 kilometers in the AMT. I think I have a screenshot, I'll share that, but I think over a mix of conditions where I actually went through villages and small towns around. We were outside Bangalore.
Of course, because if you were inside Bangalore, you would have traveled no distance at all from whatever you guys are telling us.
So instead of sticking to the highway, I spent a lot of time doing the B roads, and it was gorgeous.
Yeah.
The weather was awesome, and I can't believe that there are some really beautiful roads. I actually wanted to tell you some really awesome roads, which were just like, you don't realize they're just literally 5 minutes from the highway.
Yeah.
And different vibe altogether. So drove through a lot of that kind of stuff, and with the AMT I got somewhere around 16 and a half, 17, something like that, mix of driving, including hard acceleration.
Sure.
Right? So fuel efficiency.
So more like a test cycle than a family driving cycle.
Yeah, I'm saying that's a fairly strong figure for the kind of driving that I was doing.
Okay.
Similar number even with the manual, just about 16 or so. But in the manual, I was driving a lot harder.
Sure.
Right? Because we had to find out whether it was Swift in spirit as well or not. So
Okay.
did that as well. So fuel efficiency, definitely not a single iota of hesitation.
Okay. So most people will see at least low 20s, maybe even mid 20s.
Out
what
on
you're
the
expecting.
highway, easily.
Okay.
Easily. I'm not doubting that for sure.
Okay.
So this engine, in terms of being more usable, as was Maruti's goal, in terms of being more fuel efficient, it's on point.
All right.
In terms of being swift enough, not on point.
Okay.
Right? And the second aspect to this is the handling. Right? The previous gen Swift genuinely surprised me with the kind of front end it had.
Right.
It was so pointy.
Hmm.
It was a genuine delight. Right?
Right.
That's why when we've spoken about it in the past, I've said that it's a car that completely, I love it because of that. Right? This car isn't like that.
Okay.
It feels more clean in the way it behaves. The older one had that slightly sharpish feel to it. You could actually pivot that car, which means rotate it a bit, just turn it a bit using the brakes also. Just steer a little bit, get on the brakes, it would turn, right? It was very, very good, very enjoyable because of it. This car doesn't do any of that. It's a clean car.
So the responses are predictable, but you're not going to get super excited driving this car. Okay.
So anybody driving even on your typical state highways, which are not perfectly smooth and all, and we did some of that as well, at 100, 120, undulating surfaces, sharper corners, this car won't worry you, right? And the real beauty about this car now is the updated suspension.
Okay.
Right? The chassis has been made stiffer, and now it gets new springs, dampers, all of that. In fact, I was pleasantly surprised. You know, like even in the Ignis Swift, they had this one common characteristic, even the Desire, which was if you go over sharper bumps, you'd feel that tuck, like that when there's a high deflection, you'd feel that. Rest of the time, it would be fine, but every now and then you'd get that tuck, tuck, gone. So much so that I, in my notes, wrote that this feels SUV-like.
Oh.
You know the road to Nandi Hills, that train crossing, the speed breakers before and after that?
Yeah.
First time I went over it, went a little
Peacefully,
carefully.
yeah.
Next time, just rolled over them. Didn't brake quick. I said, dekhte hain. Right? What happens? Does it ground out?
Correct.
Does it hit the stops? Nothing.
At least it didn't let you know.
Nothing. I'm telling you, it was clean.
Very nice.
It was, that is for me a highlight on what
Did they tell you how they achieved that?
So they just said that basically new suspension, so new dampers, tuning is different.
Okay.
Interestingly, if you're an existing Swift owner, you might want to try this out on your Swift. I mean, the third gen Swift, because they said the hard points are the same. So there's no difference.
So it should be retrofittable.
So yeah.
So, okay, that's a great point. So if you have an old Swift and you're looking at a suspension change anyway, maybe get the dampers from the new car.
I'm actually wondering, can they be fitted onto the Ignis somehow? Because the Ignis definitely could do with this and it would be beautiful, man.
It's worth exploring.
Yeah, it would be awesome. So that's a definite highlight. So two takeaways for buyers here definitely are, if you are looking for a sporty and fun to drive Swift, buy the previous gen if you can still get your hands on it.
Right.
And if you're an existing Swift owner and are looking to get your suspension upgraded or just need to change it out, try and get the new suspension units from the new Swift.
Got it.
Right. So other improvements, the clutch action is light. They have a new hydraulic unit because this 3-cylinder more torquey. So all of that. The steering feels smoother.
Okay.
Right? Is it feelsome?
No.
Will it get you involved? No.
Okay.
But it works. It's clean. Right? So it's a more disconnected but a more complete car.
Got it. Yeah, right? It's more of a family car than it used to be.
Yeah.
Purely.
So that is why I came away from this thinking, okay, I see what's happening. Like you said, right? Up front, that was on point, that this is meant for the masses.
Yeah.
Will the masses enjoy this? Like, you know, the folks who used to enjoy the DDIS grunt, the diesel.
Yeah.
They will appreciate that pull that this engine has more than the previous one. But is it as smooth? Does it feel as sophisticated? Not to me.
Got it.
Right? There is a sense of disconnect even on the throttle. It's a little bit slower. Right? So these are all the factors that
So it's a shrewd product. But the guys who look at the Swift as a sporty or hatchback, they're not going to be super happy with this update.
No.
Okay.
Right? Because for me, as much as I'm attached to the Swift, right? Especially, and again, because of the previous gen, does this car make me look at the Swift in the same manner? No, it doesn't.
No, got it.
Right?
Yeah.
It makes me look at the previous one with more fondness now.
Yeah.
Right? And it's not as polished. It's not as well packaged. Right?
Yeah.
But I look at that
but I
and
think
say,
in the recent few MotorInc First, we've brought up this kind of points for other machines too, where manufacturers becoming more and more mass friendly starts to rob the same product of the original character, the original values, the original things that surprised us, the things that drew us to these products. So I suppose this is going to happen to us a lot until this transition is complete, and then we can see competent or fresher new platforms come out.
Yeah.
So yeah, okay, I understand it. I don't like it. I understand it.
Yeah, I know. Same here. I mean, like, as much as I would like to say this is not how it should be done and all of that kind of stuff, I get it. I mean, for so many people, just driving a Swift, a car like this with this kind of performance is going to feel special. And I get it.
Okay.
And given all the features and everything and all added on in terms of safety, I would say definitely it is feeling more complete.
Yeah, right? So it's easier for you to recommend. Unless the guy says, I really think of Swift as a sporty car, in which case it will be harder for you to recommend. Okay, we get it. Is it a safer car than before structurally? Is there a crash test, etc., etc.?
Crash test and all is not out right now.
Okay.
Safety standpoint, it's upgraded chassis. Whether it goes for tests or not, we will see. That's up to them. And I think it would make sense for them to do that. The idea of Maruti fitting the car with 6 airbags as standard points in a certain direction. And keep in mind that it was Nexa that started off with the idea of saying we will offer you standard safety equipment like dual airbags and ABS. But now it's in the arena car that we are seeing 6 airbags as standard now. As well, and we still don't have a Baleno with 6 airbags as standard. Right. So it's a certain direction that you can see that they are taking. So I would expect it to do reasonably well, and yeah, that's when it comes out. The one thing on the safety front. Oh, you didn't ask me the question.
Which is?
Think.
What?
We spoke about the cabin, the interiors, the seats.
The screen. No.
One more. So 3 guesses.
Aircon.
One is done.
What air? Oh God, no! This car doesn't have pressure load sensors for the seat belts either.
So they don't have load sensors for the rear seats, but you don't have the chimes. We spoke about this in the Innova View as well. That it does this funny thing that when you're seated with the seatbelt buckled, obviously it's not going to buzz, right? If nobody's sitting there and the seatbelt is not buckled, it doesn't create a fuss. But if somebody was sitting in a seat and then leaves the seat and it's not buckled in, then it creates a fuss. So what they're doing is they're playing with software. So that's what they have done even with the Swift. So when you're now looking at the back, and I did this 3 times when I started off, look back, I said the seatbelts are not buckled. Right? But there's no chimes. I kept waiting for it to happen, but it didn't. And then I figured it out that they've applied the same software strategy.
Okay.
Right? And this is something that should be done for all the models. If you're not going to do load sensors, at least do this, because then you don't have to reach back or stop and just buckle seatbelts up so that they stop making a fuss. Right?
Okay.
So that's an improvement without increasing cost. Right? An important point. And the other thing that I feel is a real miss, and I definitely think that Maruti need to address it, is the lack of TPMS.
Okay.
Right? Tire pressure monitoring systems, according to me, are even more important than having 6 airbags in a car.
Okay.
Right? We keep saying this. Stability aids are more important because they will keep you from getting into an incident in the first place.
Right.
And as simple and basic as a TPMS system may sound like or seem like, is the one thing that will always give you a view into your contact patch, which is
so would critical. You rather have a deflation warning or would you rather have a full-fledged TPMS?
100%. So what Shumi is talking about is the 2 levels of TPMS you can have. Deflation warning is the simple one where basically it will tell you when a tire started losing.
Correct.
Air, right? Whereas a proper full-fledged TPMS system
will give you a constant readout plus
warnings. Will give you the pressure some of the other systems also show you temperature.
Which
Pressure.
is of no use at all.
Yeah, pressure is what you definitely need. Temperature is a luxury, but the one that you should have, I think, is the full-fledged system.
Okay.
I understand, affordable cars, the smaller cars getting a deflation warning system, understandable. But for cars in this segment, I think a proper TPMS should be there.
Okay.
And even in the Grand Vitara, Maruti is offering it on the higher variants. I think it should now be standard. And on this front, Hyundai and Kia, for instance, are offering it as standard.
Okay.
Which is great. And I think that is how it should be.
Okay. Point
Right?
noted.
And that for me is a big miss. Right?
Okay.
Any questions?
No, we have a fairly clear picture of the car by now. I think you've covered what they've changed pretty well. You've covered the change in safety equipment. You've covered the change in nature and character. They've changed obviously who the car's supposed to appeal to, and it's a grown-up car, so therefore it'll appeal to a slightly more mature audience in some ways. So yeah.
And while we were talking about it making fewer sounds now, one thing I forgot to add, in some areas it's making more sounds.
So
it does a startup sound now, which is like that. Think of the Windows laptop starting up like that, Sorry, that's not the right sound. But
why? Because the engine doesn't make a sound when it turns over.
I guess it's preparing for that eventuality. So it has that, and it also says, "Welcome to the epic new Swift." So small things.
Will it do this for the rest of its life? And can you not turn this thing off?
There are ways to turn it off. I'm
good.
sure I will find it. If it's not there, I will figure out a way. But as far as I remember, you can change.
Welcome to the epic new Swift.
There are some ways to change the message.
There was the Mahindra Xylo which spoke to you a lot.
All the Mahindras.
And I've not driven the later ones. I drove that Xylo a lot, and my God, the first time it was amusing. By the third time, it was just terrible.
Nothing about the Xylo was amusing, and nothing about it was not terrible.
I think it was really amusing because I have never seen that much body roll in one vehicle at one point in one corner ever. I made the most of it and I had a great time driving it. Everybody in the car with me did not feel so enthusiastically about the Xylo, and that was fine with me.
Did the third row have pop-up windows?
Pop-up windows?
Pop-out windows.
I don't remember now.
Whoever's there needs them.
I remember the idea of that Xylo being saying, your Xylo is about to run out of fuel. That in the beginning, I don't know why it was there, but it was always there. And you couldn't tell if the guy was sexually aroused, clearing his throat, feeling sleepy. I couldn't tell.
The voices are always very deep and gravelly.
Which was fine. But there would be in the beginning, which I couldn't understand. I don't know what it was there for. But it wouldn't say your Xylo's about to run out of fuel.
The good thing is that's not the problem with the Swift, okay? So that's not a problem. What else? Anything else that I missed out?
Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
People will ask, we will answer. Yeah,
okay. 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 Summary?
Sure. Let's do the quick summary. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the epic new Swift. This is what the car is going to say to you when you turn the car on. We don't know why this feature is there, but Kartik has vowed that he will figure out how to turn this thing off because it doesn't need it. As of today, it still has a petrol engine, which means when you do this, the car makes sounds anyway, so you don't need this chime. Maybe they're preparing for a hybrid to come, which Kartik again suspects, even if it happens to the Swift, it's not going to happen anytime soon. Since we're talking about the engine, you have a new 3-cylinder engine in there. And it is a far more competent engine than the outgoing K series, but it's a less fun engine than the outgoing K series. So in terms of pure numbers, this engine accelerates harder. It should give you about 10% more fuel economy than before. It's a lot smoother than before. No, it's not smoother than before, but it's smoother versus other 3-cylinder engines, etc., etc. So it's a good engine. It's connected to a nice AMT gearbox and a good manual transmission. The gearing has not been changed in any significant way, and still this car feels a little more dull to drive than the old Swift because throttle response is a little bit laggy. There's 200 RPM you've lost off the top in terms of the red line. It just feels like a calmer, gentler engine, which is a good thing in the sense that the whole car feels like calmer, gentler and more grown up. So there are updates to the chassis, including a stronger version of the old chassis, which is deployed onto the new Swift. You've got new suspension setup, which makes the car better, but it's not as sharp as the old Swift used to be. So when you go into corners, you'll see the competence, but you won't see an enthusiastic side of the car, and your connection to the car therefore will be weaker. What doesn't help that is the fact that the steering is also a little bit lifeless. Again, competent, functional, accurate, but no connection. On the interiors, it's the same cabin as before physically in terms of space. The seats are slightly better, the dash is reorganized, and it's still a very simple looking dash, but it is a good looking car. But what Maruti is not being able to do is create cool cabins that you feel for, which, for example, Kias do quite naturally, Hyundais do quite well. Maruti still not unlocked that, and that remains the case with the Swift. So will you think of this as a poor quality cabin? No. Will you think of this as an old school cabin? Also no. But will you think, oh wow, that is so cool? Yeah, also no. In terms of price, the price has gone up by a very small amount, 30,000 rupees odd, and in that you get a lot more safety equipment now. So all of the Swifts will now have 6 airbags as standard. You've got ESC, you've got hill hold, etc., etc. So they've upped the safety quotient. We don't know whether this car will be crash tested at Bharat New Vehicle Assessment Program or not, but it will definitely have to pass the Indian standard 55 kmph test to be able to go on sale. So it should be a safer Swift than before. How much safer, we don't know yet, and we don't have a clear indication from Maruti when crash test results, etc., will be reported or not. Apart from this, the design has been updated. It's a clever design in the sense it keeps the basic values of the Swift in place, but you will see the new car and think of it as slightly better design, slightly more upmarket. It's a smoother looking car than before, but because it is the Swift and it is a popular car, Maruti's latitude in terms of doing something dramatic with the Swift is obviously going to be limited. Now, the 3-cylinder engine has another aspect, which is the hybrid aspect, which is that this engine will probably be the partner to the hybrid system that is coming. Kartikeya believes that the Swift is not the right candidate for the car, at least in the short term, and the Brezza or a serious update to the Ciaz featuring the new hybrid system is what is more likely to happen. After that has stabilized, maybe they will bring that system to the Swift, because the Swift is Maruti's bread and butter car. It's among their most popular models. They will not mess with it. They don't want a disruption in this class. So net, it's a very competent car. You think of it as slightly more premium than before. It's a safer car than before, etc., etc. But the older Swift used to be more fun to drive. It felt more connected. This Swift is not going to feel like that. It's a little bit more mature and therefore a little bit calmer and therefore less excitable. What did I miss?
I was so busy listening to you that I kind of lost track of that.
Oh, and they've got a clever new system that does not use load sensors in the seats, but the seat belts will not chime at you if there's nobody sitting in the seat constantly. It'll just happen intermittently now because there's software to take care of it.
Larger touchscreen, more premium sound system, but not super premium. 6-speaker setup, all of that. The larger touchscreen we've spoken about.
And can the children leave the car through the roof?
No sunroof.
No sunroof. Yes, good job, Maruti.
Yeah.
No, really good job.
Wireless charger is there, and no ventilated seats, so those kind of feature misses are there. What else?
Yeah, I think we covered it.
All done, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, the one thing that I missed was saying that it, you would have already seen it on the screen, but it's got the new blue color, which looks really good.
New blue color?
Yeah.
Because the old color looked amazing.
Oh, no. So this is not that blue, huh? This is a new blue.
This is arena blue, not Nexa blue.
Yeah, this is not Nexa blue. This is the arena blue. It's a nice, it pops. It looks good. So that's a good color. At the same time, what we were talking about, Maruti having to create wow factor, and it's a small thing that keeps coming up with different manufacturers. Alloy wheel designs are such a key part of this. Like on the inside, we're talking about the color mix, right? On the outside, I think good wheels can just change how a car feels. And while this is a new design, does it just feel like special?
But I think your upshot of the story is that they built a more competent car, but not a more special car. So I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
And again, we've spoken about this in various contexts, but Maruti's big challenge today seems to be how to get to that special. I don't think competent has ever been questioned. Safety, the conversation is actually a lot more skewed against Maruti without reason than it is actually a problem. But the idea that Maruti can't seem to make cool cars is a problem that they have to snap out of somehow. And this Swift also says they're still not able to do it.
Yeah. Great value, more practical, more sensible, less Swift.
Less Swift. So all of you who were hoping for a Swift Sport.
Actually, because of this, it's okay. There's an interesting point in this. As what happened with the Creta facelift, when we drove the regular Creta, with this, it didn't get 18-inch wheels. It was the 17s. It didn't get a manual transmission with a turbo and all of that. And it just felt like this is such a practical car. And which made a lot of sense when you saw the N line, which came in with the manual transmission, the sportier suspension, the 18-inch wheels, the properly done thing, right? This also creates the opportunity for having a Swift Sport, which is focused, which is meant for a particular audience, because by making this all of these things which are less emotional. You open the avenue to do one properly. So do it.
Yeah, basically they're saying that if there is a road that has been built, doesn't mean that there'll be traffic going there. So I'm going to say Maruti is not going to do the Swift Sport.
So we've had both sides here.
Yeah, I think Swift was a reasonably sporty car. Now it's less sporty than that. So Karthik thinks that's a new opportunity. I think they're going to ignore that opportunity.
Optimist.
But what do you think they'll do? Leave us a comment. Do you think this more practical Swift is the key to bringing the Swift Sport or making a Swift Sport, if you prefer? I think no. Karthik obviously votes yes.
No, I don't think so. I mean, which is why I gave credit to Hyundai with what they did with the N-Line, with the Creta, and what they've been doing with the N-Lines. If this was Hyundai, I would have said that 100% it's going to come, right? They'll do it. It makes sense. You can see that they're doing it.
Correct.
So in that sense, I'll remain optimistic, but yeah, ready for
I
disappointment.
love his optimism and his endless reserve of optimism in the face of reality.
ठीक है यार, देख लेंगे, कहीं और दिल देंगे.
Okay, I'm going to wrap this up. If you have any more questions about the Swift or any other car, leave us a comment. We'll try and get you a response. MotorInc First is also available audio only on Apple, Amazon, Spotify. It's still on Google, but Google Podcast as a platform is going away in June. So after that, you'll have to, if you use Google, figure out some other way to listen to podcasts. And if there's anything else, just leave us a comment. Thank you so much for watching.